All right, everyone. Welcome to yet another tutorial and another explanation here on Script.Tutorials. My name is Ray, and I will be your host here today. And today we're going to be actually going over utilizing variables within C# and implementing them in your own methods. Now, I'm going to assume that you have at least a little bit of understanding or at least familiarity within Visual Studio and C#. So this is going to be those that are either new or intermediate within C#, or maybe you just need a little refresher as to how methods work and how variables work in different data types. So real quick, I've gone ahead and opened up Visual Studio 2022. I've created a new console application, and within that console application, I have typed the following different variables. Now, let's summarize real quick what a variable is. Now, I've gone ahead and created a quick comment, a multi-line comment. Now, this isn't actually ran, but this is just in English terms what a variable is. Now, just to recap, variables are declared with a specific type, which determines the type of value that the variable can store. You can declare a variable by specifying its type and name, and you can also assign a value to it when you declare it. This is also called initializing. Now, once a variable is declared, you can use it to store, retrieve, and manipulate data in your program, which is what we're going to do, by the way, in just a moment. So, for example, you can use the assignment operator, which is just equal sign, and we'll talk more about that here shortly, to assign a new value to the variable. Or you can use, arithmetic operations like, plus, minus, subtraction, multiplication, etc. Within the variable. So, for example, and by the way, there's a variable at the end of the day is a data type, right? So it says here a specific type, but it's technically a specific data type, right? It holds data for us, right? So now, when we create a variable, there's many different data types within C# and most programming languages too. You have a string which holds text. You have an int which holds whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3. It doesn't do decimals, just whole numbers. We have a double that does do decimals, but only to a certain degree. So if you're trying to do a more precise number, I would recommend doing a float instead of a double. We'll talk more about that later, though for now, we're just doing the basics. And then we have a bool, also known, which is short for boolean. So technically you have a boolean like this right here. But again, we don't do that, we only do bool. So a bool is a condition that can either be true or false. That's it. No in between, so it's either true or false. So let's summarize real quick. We have a string called full name. This is what I've created, called full name. And we are assigning it, right? We are assigning it. So we're declaring a string called full name, and we are assigning full name to John Smith. Or you can, do, David Smith, right? Or whatever you want in here. You could just do their first name, but for me, I called it full name, so I would assume that it has a last name as well. So I'm going to do John Smith. Now, I created a integer here called int age. Now, again, you could just, do person age if you'd like, if that's easier for you. But I'm just going to do age. I think that's a bit easier. And I just set it to 25. Now, you'll notice if I try to do 25.5, it's not going to do it. It's going to give us a little red line here telling us, hey, you cannot do that. You can only do whole numbers. However, since we need to figure out what their height is, we created a double. And as I mentioned before, doubles do support decimals. So I put here 5'8", right? So if you're in the US or somewhere that, measures in feet, they are 5'8". And again, I call that double a height. Again, you can call this whatever you want when that's the beauty of creating variables. Now, there is a large amount of those. Well, I'll put it this way. Most people in the C# community and pretty much every programming language follow by something known as camel case. And camel case, it's very simple. If you're going to do multiple words together for a variable, you need, or it's standard practice to uppercase the first letter of each word following the first word. So what I mean by that is, let's look at the name, full name here. I only capitalized the N, which is the second word, but it's the first letter of the second word, right? If you look at the bool here, which is again either true or false, I created it and it's labeled as has glasses. You don't see that H is capitalized, only G is capitalized. If I were to do here, if it was 3 words altogether, same thing. The third word of the first letter, the first letter of the third word would also be capitalized. So you're capitalizing every single first letter except the first word. The first word always stays uncapitalized. And again, that's just standard practice. It actually does. There's been studies out there that have been made that makes it easier for you to read code that way. But again, to each their own. So we've gone ahead and created these just the very basic variables. Okay, now giving you a good understanding as to what these variables are. And by the way, there's other data types out there. There's a char, which is just a character, which it's very similar to a string, which holds text, but it only holds one line or just one individual letter. So like, for example, I'm just going to call this test, and we're going to assign it to A. So it can only hold one thing. So I can do A, I can do uppercase A, but I can't just do hello, right? A character is only going to be one letter. So this would not work at all. But if you were to change this to a string, which you can do text, it would work. However, you would need actual quotations, not just that single quote or whatever that's called. So again, there's so many different data types out there. It just all depends what you're trying to create. But again, this is just a very base fundamental. Now, let's go ahead and create and utilize the following data and create a function that gives us information to the user as to what their name is and their height and has glasses and all that. So let's go ahead and create a new method within our internal class called program. Now, when we create a new method, it's always going to be, when we're working with new methods, especially methods that we are creating, a method belongs to a class, and the class here is called program. Now, later on, I'm going to do tutorials about object-oriented programming. However, for now, whenever you're just working on methods and creating methods, just know that you have to do it within the curly braces for the program class. Okay, you can't do it out here at the very end. You have to do it within, again, the program class. So if you look at the curly braces, we have to do it between here and here. So to create a new method, we're gonna go here, and I'm going to type the following. However, again, I'm going to come back and explain everything for you in just a second. So we're going to go ahead and do this. So we've created the following method called display data. Now, let me walk you through what's happening here. And I know it looks confusing. You must be like, whoa, what is static? What is void? What is, string name and int age and double and all this? So let me explain line by line what's happening here. So we created a new method, and remember, a method belongs to the class program, right? And a method is designed to perform a certain function. It's designed to do either an equation or do something for you, right? That's why we have methods, and you can create methods. I called it, just like a variable, you can name a method whatever you want. I called it display data because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be displaying their name, their age, their height, and whether or not they have glasses, right? I could just call this hello if I wanted to, right? But again, if I come back 6 months from now, I don't know what hello means, right? Unless I do really good comments and I can, write that down. But again, whenever you're creating methods or variables, just be very specific as to what it is. But let's start with the keywords here. So we had static, void. Okay, so And this will be a concept more into object-oriented programming, which is a much higher, more advanced information in terms of how C# handles objects and classes and all that. And I get it, that might be confusing for you, but let me explain. Static means that we can call the following method anywhere within the current program class. In other words, we don't have to create an instance of an object to call this method. Okay, so for example, whenever we run code, it's gonna run everything in main. So whenever you launch this console application, it's only gonna run the data here in main, right? So we have to tell it, hey, I need you to run display data, right? If the word static wasn't there, technically, there is a way to have this code that we're about to write in here run, but it involves a couple more steps, and it's a bit of an inconvenience for what we're trying to do, right? So for now, when you're working with methods, it's reasonable, until you start to get into object-oriented programming, to just write the word static when you're creating a method, and you need to do this in order. So static void. Void means that you're not returning anything to main. We're only giving it data. We're not expecting this to return anything back to main. Okay? If we were to calculate, the perimeter of a rectangle, then maybe we want to return an integer, right? If we're calculating the volume, maybe we want to return a float instead, something a bit more precise. But we're not returning anything. We're just basically sending data to this method. And then lastly, of course, the name of the method. And now you might be wondering, what is all of this? So this is what's considered parameters and what we require the developer ourselves, or anyone else working on this in the future, in order to use the method display data. So in order to go here, we need to make sure that the following is provided. We need to make sure that a string is provided, an integer is provided, a double is provided, and a bool is provided, all in that order, right? So let's do this. So we've created the variables within main. How do we pass this information over to display data? Well, we pass it by utilizing the following parameters. And parameters is the information that we need to pass from one method to another method. If we were to do this blank, we could still call it, but it's not going to know what to take, right? So we need to make sure that whenever we're sending data from one place to another, what data does it need and what is the chronological data that it needs. So see how we have string here, full name? You notice that the very first parameter is string, and then int, it's because there's an int that was established, and then double, we have double, and then bool, we have bool. Now you can name these parameters anything. As you noticed, I don't have to name this full name. You can if you want, because technically speaking, when you're creating variables, they're only saved to the method that they're in. So I can't access full name in here. I can't access age in this method display data. That's why we're creating new variables that's going to be passed over. And again, this will make a lot more sense in just a second, and also once you start to understand object-oriented programming, which we'll probably cover in future videos. But let's go ahead and display the following data. So we're going to do a console.writeLine, and we're going to go ahead and we want to make sure that we write the name of the person, which is this string right here. Okay, so we're telling, hey, whatever they gave us as a string, put it here in the console. And now we're going to do console.writeLine age, which is the second parameter. And then we're going to do console.writeLine. And you can do CW, by the way, and then double tab on your keyboard, and it'll automatically write that for you. And then we can do height. And then what do you think the last one is? Glasses. So here we have 4 different lines of code that's going to be ran and what's going to be displayed to the user. Now, if we were to run this right now, nothing's going to happen. And the reason nothing's going to happen is because we have not actually called the display data. So what we need to do is back in our main section, and again, this is because remember, when you launch the program, it's only running what's inside the main. And if we haven't told it to go to display data, it's not going to assume that for us. We have to tell it. So let's create a new line, and we're just going to say, hey, let's go to display data. And you might be wondering, well, that's all you need to do. But that's not true, because if we try to run this, we get an error down here. An error saying that there's no argument given. So we need to give arguments when we're going to another method. In this case, we need to tell it, hey, we need to pass full name to name, we need to pass age to age, pass height to height, and then has glasses to glasses. So in here, if you hover over display data, do you see what we need to pass over? We need to pass over a string, an integer, a double, and a bool, all in that order. So we're going to go ahead and pass full name, which again, we're accessing it from up here. We're going to pass age, going to pass height, and we're going to pass has glasses. So we've created we're calling a method, and the arguments, which that's the technical term, the arguments are full name, which is what we've created here, age, which is what we've created here, height, which is this double here, and then has glasses, which is a false statement here. And this is being then assigned when it's calling this method. It's now being assigned to these strings here. So so full name is now gonna be, at least while we're in here, full name is gonna be set to name, age is gonna be set to age, height is set to height, and you guessed it, has glasses is set to has glasses, or in this case, just glasses. I could name this to has glasses, but I like to be a little bit different. So what happens now is we're going to do a console.write line with name, age, height, and glasses based on the parameters and the data that was passed. So now let's run the code. And you'll notice, here it is. John Smith, 25, 5'8", and false. And you can play around a little bit with this. So for example, if you wanted to maybe display some more context there, I can create a quotation, or just two quotation marks. So there's two quotation marks, and I'm gonna say full name. And whenever we're concatenating strings together or data together, we need to make sure that we do a plus sign. So plus does not mean always that you're adding like 1 + 1. What we're doing here is we're telling it, hey, display full name, and also go ahead and put whatever, the variable or whatever is held inside of name. So for example, if I run this code again, you'll see that here, full name, and then John Smith. So and that's why you'll notice I did an extra space here, because if I don't do a space here, I just think it looks weird. So like, watch, if I rerun this, see how it's all together, full name, full name, and there's no I feel like there should be a space between the semicolon there. So again, formatting, I think, plays big here. So, and then same here, you can do, for example, age, and again, you need to do a plus, and then we're going to say height, and then plus, and then let's just say has glasses, or let's say not has, let's say needs glasses, and then plus. So now if we run this code, there we go. We have a nice description that says full name John Smith, age is 25, height is 5'8", and whether or not they need glasses, and of course we had that set to false. I'm going to change some of this real quick as a final little thing. What if I change has glasses to true now? Let's say they, for some reason, have grown and now they're 6 foot, and they're now 26, and let's say they got married and now their name is John, Sanders, I don't know, John Sanders. So we can just change these lines of code anytime, and it's automatically going to do it for us. Because again, we're declaring the variables here, and all this is doing is just passing it over to the display data method. So if I were to call this console, or if we run the code again, it's no longer John Smith that was 25 and was 5'8" and didn't need glasses. Now it's John Sanders that's 26. Their height is 6. And it's true that they do need glasses, right? So I hope this gives you a better understanding in terms of what's happening. And I'm going to go ahead and write some comments here just to kind of give you a better visualization in case you want to read it. So let me just write those comments for you real quick. Okay, so I added just 2 extra lines here for you. One of them is here for variables declared and initialized with values, which is true. Those are the 4 different variables. And then I added here, specifically since we're covering about methods, that this is a static method that takes 4 parameters, which is a string, an integer, a double, and a boolean, or we like to call it a bool. But again, boolean is the technical term. So overall, that is how methods work, and you can do methods in any way that you'd like. Again, the main thing here is if you were to create a method that, maybe you want to add numbers together, you need to make sure that the void keyword is set to like an integer or a double or a float if you're going to be returning data back to main. So remember, anytime you're returning data back to main, you need to make sure that you have a return type in here, whether it's an int or a string or anything. If we're not returning anything and we're just displaying information that we're not going to be utilizing later on, at least for the time being, then it's good to just do void. If you're doing a calculator, you don't want to change that to whatever, if people are going to be doing calculation problems that have decimals, it doesn't make sense to return an integer because you're going to be missing data if they typed in what's 1.5 plus 2.6. It's only going to give them a whole number. So we want to make sure that we do a double if we were doing a calculator. And if you wanted to return the data and save it somewhere within main. And again, we'll actually probably in one of the next couple of videos, I'm gonna do another video which will cover a more advanced topic on methods and how return types work, which is basically like a part 2 to this video. So I hope you enjoyed this first series of understanding C# and just going over the fundamentals of C#, different variables and how variables work and how methods work. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If there's anything that I missed that you need clarification on, again, I'll be happy to check comments. And if you have any ideas for future videos, if maybe you're a computer science major or you're a student or you're someone learning C# and there's something you don't understand, again, ask. I'd be happy to either answer you in the comments, or if it's a video, or if it's a good idea for a video, I might even take your question and answer it in a video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment, and I will catch you on the next video.